What's dudes? Welcome back to PLB Green. Today, I'm going to be building this IKEA display cabinet into 5.5 foot tall paludarium that rains. The first step is to take apart the cabinet, and I'm putting some tape down and siliconing each of the joins. This is necessary because the regular cabinet has metal braces to help reinforce it, but I don't want to keep those in, I want to take them out. Also, silicone is necessary to keep this thing watertight. I'm also putting a bead of silicone along the inside edges, and then I'm using the 3 glass shelves that came with the cabinet, one for the base, one for the front panel of the water section of the paludarium, and the third one for the top. I'm using beads of silicone, and it doesn't matter how messy you are here because you can always scrape the excess silicone off with a blade once it dries. Got my level here to show me that the front of the paludarium water section is straight, and then putting on the lid. Alright, here it is the next day. I'm actually really liking it. It's super stable. Initially, it had these 2 support beams. They're made of metal, but I found that with the silicone in all of the seals and adding this brace here for the water portion, it's actually really stable. More stable than it was without the silicone and the support beams. So the next step is going to be doing a water test, seeing if it holds water, and then fixing up the irrigation system and see if we can get this thing raining. So far so good. It looks like it's holding the water pretty well. No leaks. My irrigation system, which I've already put together, is just some gardening irrigation pipe and a water feature pump. I've got it coming the full height of the paludarium. At the top, it does this U shape and it has these little spray nozzles in it. Test. Rain, baby, rain! It works, and I really like it. At the moment, I've got the irrigation rigged up, glued in. I had to use a bit of silicone in the end, and I've just taped it up there until the silicone dries. I've also temporarily just taped in a little strip LED light. I don't really know what the lighting is going to be like in this setup, so I don't want to make anything permanent yet. That's why I'm just using duct tape. But I might be a little bit experimental with lighting a little bit later on down the track. Another problem that I came across was that if the water at the bottom is too deep, the rain drips, because they're falling so far, when they hit the water down below, it splashes out the front, which is okay because the rain's only going to be on temporarily every now and then, but I would prefer it if it didn't splash out. So I'm going to have to make the water area at the bottom a little bit shallower. So I put in the main hardscape that I want this enclosure to have. It's this beautiful old twisted piece of mangrove driftwood. I've had this piece for quite a while now, and when I saw this cabinet at IKEA, I knew it was kind of the perfect size and height to feature this beautiful piece of wood. I don't want to put any backing on this enclosure. I just love the pure white and looking through. I want it to rain down and drip down the mangrove and have moss and bromeliads and other plants growing off it with a little water feature down the bottom. I'm not going to secure the wood in at all. I'm not going to put any expanding foam or silicone. I want to be able to remove it, and also I just think it doesn't need it. It's stable in there at the moment, and just looking really nice. We're almost up to planting. First, I'm going to put some wet sphagnum moss into the cracks and crevices in the log. And then I'm going to plant some of these. We got some species of peperomia. This is a species of pothos, satin pothos, and these just came from IKEA. They're pretty cheap. I've got a big old bucket of terrestrial moss, and I got this from Flower Power. They gave it to me for free. It was just growing underneath their flower shelves. And I've got one of these tiny little Paella rantifolia, or money plant, I believe. A couple of small bromeliads as well. I'm also going to use some plants from my fern garden that I have outside, but that will just be for some finishing touches. I'm going to start off with these. Here they are in all their glory. The peperomia and the pothos, the ones that came from IKEA, were actually buried in 100% peat moss, so I didn't have to wash those because peat moss is actually fine for a setup like this. The other ones were potting mix, so they needed a wash. As long as the roots are moist, they'll be fine in this setup. Look at these beautiful things. Now I want the bromeliads to kind of be the focal point. So there's one of them planted. I might put a little bit more sphagnum moss just to secure it in place. And then I'll work on the next one. A little bit more sphagnum moss. Here's a full view of the setup so far. I've got those two bromeliads closer to the top. I think I'm going to need another bromeliad down the bottom just to balance it out a bit. I might try the pothos. This is a vine anyway, so it'd be cool to plant in the bottom so it's kind of growing up. So first things first, stuff the cavity with sphagnum moss. Then place the peperomia in. So this is all the plants that I bought planted in the tank. I've got the two mini bromeliads towards the top, the peperomia around here making a kind of rim. Be careful with the peperomia because their leaves are super brittle and they will snap off easily. Then following down the trunk, it's a bit bald in the middle there, but I'm going to trail moss down that crack. And then down the bottom we have the pothos, and then we have the button fern. So it's looking pretty good. It's almost ready for water, but first I'm going to be putting moss, terrestrial moss in various places. And then I might also put a plant closer to the top of the tank, right up here. Initially I put some substrate and rocks at the bottom. I changed my mind later on and I took it out, just had a clean look with water and some floating plants. So this is a close-up of some of the moss detailing. So what I do is I just start off with some damp sphagnum moss, squeeze out the water, put it into various shapes, tear bits off, and wherever I'm going to put terrestrial moss, I usually stuff a little bit of sphagnum moss, just so there's going to be retained moisture. So I'm trying to replicate nature where I think moss would grow, and it usually grows where water pools. So water might pool here. So tuck the sphagnum moss in like that. Then take a small bit of the terrestrial moss. The cool thing about this moss is that it does have a little bit of sediment behind it, and that helps to secure it onto the sphagnum moss. So you just push it down like that. And if there's too much sediment on the back of the moss, you can just scrape it off. Here we go, here's a nice bit. Push it in so it makes contact with the sphagnum moss underneath. Now make sure this is soaked in rainwater and not water from your tap, because it's got chlorine in it, water from your tap, and the moss doesn't like chlorine. Okay, wedge it in. And when this moss grows in, it'll just cover all of the damp areas. All right, that's looking pretty good. So I've changed my idea on lighting. Oh, I bought 2 of these plug-in floodlights. They were pretty cheap, and they're 1,700 lumens each. I'm gonna put this one here. I've screwed it to the outside of the cabinet and it's aiming down. And my idea is to put the other one at the bottom, facing up on the left-hand side. This is the brand I got, it's Arlic. DIY LED security floodlight, and it's a plug-in one, so it's really useful. 1,700 lumen each, and they were about $25 AUD from my local hardware. That is cheap. $50 to light an entire setup at that many lumens is super high quality. So they come like this, and they have this little bracket. The lead is quite short, but it comes with screws that you can use either into a brick wall or into timber. So just one on each side with a little washer, and I'm gonna do this one at the bottom. Dude, those lights are sick. That is an upgrade and a half. Look at that boost. Look at that thing. It needs more planting, but it's looking really nice. Finish off the planting, I've got a few small samples of plants out of my fern garden. I love having a fern garden outside because I can just go out and sample things like this, and it regrows pretty much instantly. Start off with some baby tips. Here I have a pair of orchids. I'm going to use a tiny dab of super glue just to hold these stems in until the roots secure onto the log.
For this small fern, I'm going to use a short length of fishing line and secure it onto the log until its roots secure. The good news is you can barely see it. You can see the water at the bottom of the paludarium is tan in colour. That is all the tannins from the log soaking into the water. That will happen for a month or two and then the water will run clear. And that's a complete product for my IKEA cabinet paludarium rainforest. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time on PLB Green.